For thousands of years, bread stood at the center of human survival. Civilizations rose with it. Empires fed their people with it. Families built their daily meals around it. A simple loaf made from grain, water, salt, and thyme once carried extraordinary power. It delivered steady energy, deep nourishment, and a feeling of satisfaction that lasted for hours. In many ancient cultures, bread was not just food, it was life itself. Farmers harvested grains that were rich with natural nutrients. Bakers slowly ground those grains between stones, preserving every part of the seed. Dough rested and fermented slowly, sometimes overnight, sometimes even longer. During that quiet process, nature performed a kind of transformation. Nutrients became easier to absorb. The bread developed flavor, strength, and density. People ate it daily, sometimes several times a day, and it supported generations of strong bodies and hardworking lives. For most of human history, bread was respected as one of the most powerful foods on earth. It was filling, stable, and dependable. It helped build civilizations, feed armies, and sustain communities through both prosperity and hardship. Yet the bread sitting on supermarket shelves today tells a very different story. The soft white slices packaged in plastic bags may look familiar, but the truth behind them is far less comforting. The modern loaf has been reshaped by industrial processes, altered ingredients, and shortcuts designed for speed and profit. What once took hours or even days to prepare can now be produced in a matter of minutes inside massive factories. The grain itself has changed. The way it is processed has changed. The fermentation that once gave bread its strength and digestibility is often shortened or skipped entirely. In its place, a long list of additives, conditioners, preservatives, and processing techniques now define what most people call bread. The result may look soft and convenient, but the deeper nutritional story has shifted in ways that many people never realize. Behind this transformation lies a fascinating and controversial history. During the last century, the global food industry quietly reinvented bread. Traditional milling methods that preserved nutrients were replaced with high-speed steel rollers that stripped away important parts of the grain. Natural fermentation was replaced with rapid mixing techniques that could push dough through machines at incredible speeds. Chemicals were introduced to bleach flour, strengthen dough, and extend shelf life. Each change promised efficiency and consistency, but together they gradually turned one of humanity's oldest foods into something very different. The most surprising part is that many of these changes happened without the public fully understanding what was being lost along the way. In this video, a hidden story unfolds. The journey begins with the ancient bread that nourished early civilizations and moves through the Industrial Revolution that reshaped the entire baking industry. You will learn how traditional grains once contained powerful nutrients that help support energy, digestion, and long-term health. You will discover how modern milling removes key parts of the grain that once provided fiber, vitamins, and minerals. You will see how fast bread-making systems replace slow fermentation and why that change may affect how the body processes bread today. There are also lesser-known details that rarely appear in everyday conversations about food. Certain chemicals that once became common in commercial baking have been restricted or banned in parts of the world because of health concerns. Some large-scale farming practices introduce substances that can remain on grains before they even reach the bakery. And the modern demand for extremely soft, long-lasting bread pushed manufacturers to engineer products that behave very differently inside the human body compared with the bread our ancestors ate. By the end of this video, the picture becomes much clearer. Bread itself is not the villain of the story. The grain that once sustained civilization still exists. The traditional methods that created nourishing bread are still practiced by some bakers around the world. But the mass-produced version found in many stores today carries a history of shortcuts and alterations that few people fully understand. Learning what changed reveals why bread can affect people differently today than it did in the past. It also explains why many nutrition experts encourage a closer look at the type of bread people choose to eat. The goal here is not fear, but awareness. Food has always evolved with technology, culture, and economics. Sometimes those changes bring real improvements. Other times they quietly remove important qualities that once made certain foods valuable to the human body. Bread provides one of the clearest examples of how a natural staple can slowly transform into a highly processed product. When the full timeline is revealed, the difference between ancient bread and modern factory bread becomes almost shocking. Watching this story all the way to the end will uncover facts that most people never learn about everyday foods. The transformation of bread involves science, agriculture, economics, and decisions made decades ago that still shape what appears on grocery store shelves today. Piece by piece, the hidden evolution of bread will come into focus, revealing how one of the oldest superfoods on Earth gradually became one of the most misunderstood items in the modern diet. Welcome to the channel where complex health topics are explained in simple and clear ways so that anyone can understand what is really happening inside the foods we eat every day. If learning the deeper truth behind common foods interests you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay with this video until the end, because the story of bread is far more surprising than most people expect, and what you discover here may completely change the way you look at the next slice on your plate. Long before modern food factories existed, bread was one of the most natural foods people could eat. For thousands of years, it was made with patience and simplicity. Farmers harvested grains from the fields and carried them to local mills. There, the grains were slowly crushed between heavy stone wheels. This process was gentle compared to modern high-speed milling. The entire grain remained intact. Nothing important was stripped away. Every tiny part of the grain stayed inside the flour. When that flour was mixed with water and a little salt, the dough slowly came alive through natural fermentation. Tiny living organisms from the air and the grain itself began working quietly inside the mixture. They slowly transformed the dough, creating flavor, texture, and structure. Bakers did not rush this step. They allowed the dough to rest for hours. Sometimes the dough fermented overnight. In some regions, it fermented even longer. During that time, the bread developed deep flavor and natural strength. When it finally went into the oven, the result was a dense and nourishing loaf that could feed a family for an entire day. People relied on bread because it was filling and dependable. It did not cause sudden bursts of hunger. Instead, it released energy slowly, allowing farmers, builders, and laborers to work long hours without fatigue. Bread became such an essential food that many cultures built their daily meals around it. In villages across Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and parts of Asia, bread appeared on the table every day. It was not treated like a side dish. It was the foundation of the meal itself. The reason traditional bread had such powerful nutritional value was hidden inside the grain. A whole grain is far more complex than it appears at first glance. Each tiny seed contains three major parts that work together to create a complete food. The outer layer is called the bran. This protective shell is packed with fiber and important minerals. Fiber helps digestion move smoothly through the body and slows the absorption of carbohydrates. It also creates the feeling of fullness that prevents overeating. Inside the bran sits the germ. This tiny core is the living embryo of the plant. It contains natural oils, antioxidants, vitamins, and protein. The germ holds much of the grain's nutritional power because it carries the nutrients needed to grow a new plant. At the center of the grain lies the endosperm. This portion contains mostly starch and some protein. It provides energy for the growing seed. When all three parts remain together, the grain becomes a balanced food that supports the body in multiple ways. Fiber from the bran supports digestion. Nutrients from the germ nourish the body. Carbohydrates from the endosperm provide energy. For most of history, people consumed grains in this complete form. When stone mills crushed wheat, barley, rye, or other grains, the entire structure remained in the flour. Nothing was separated. Nothing was removed. Bread baked from this flour contained the full nutritional package nature designed. Because of this, traditional bread provided far more than simple calories. It delivered protein that helped maintain muscles and body tissues. It supplied B vitamins that support the nervous system and help the body convert food into energy. It provided minerals like iron, magnesium, and zinc that play important roles in blood health, immune function, and metabolism. Even the natural oils in the germ contributed small but valuable amounts of healthy fats. These nutrients worked together to create a food that could sustain people day after day. In many regions, bread was eaten at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Workers carried pieces of bread with them into the fields because it remained filling for hours. Families often paired bread with vegetables, cheese, or simple soups. The bread itself provided the energy needed to stay active throughout the day. Because of its importance, bread earned a special place in language and culture. In many societies, it was described as the staff of life. That phrase meant bread was as essential as the walking stick that supports a traveler on a long journey. Without it, survival would have been far more difficult. Over centuries, the methods of baking changed very little. Bakers passed their knowledge from one generation to the next. The rhythm of bread making followed the rhythm of the day. Grain was milled slowly, dough was mixed by hand or with simple tools. Fermentation took place naturally. Bakers judged the readiness of the dough by its smell, its texture, and the way it responded to touch. Every loaf reflected the quality of the grain and the skill of the baker. Even though recipes varied across cultures, the basic principles stayed the same. Whole grains remained intact. Fermentation was allowed to happen gradually. Time was treated as an essential ingredient. As the modern era approached, powerful economic and technological forces began to reshape the food system. The late 19th and early 20th centuries brought rapid industrial growth. Cities expanded quickly. Populations increased. Feeding large urban populations required new approaches to food production. Traditional bakeries could not always keep up with growing demand. Milling technology also began to change. Instead of stone wheels that crushed grain slowly, new steel roller mills appeared. These machines worked much faster and could produce huge amounts of flour. However, the process was very different from traditional milling. The rollers separated the grain into parts instead of crushing it as a whole. The bran and germ were often removed from the flour during this process. What remained was mostly the starchy endosperm. This white flour had a smooth texture and a longer shelf life because the natural oils from the germ were no longer present to spoil. At the time, this new flour was seen as a technological improvement. It looked cleaner and lighter in color. Many consumers began to associate white bread with modern progress and higher social status. Darker breads made from whole grains slowly gained a reputation as food for poorer communities, even though they were nutritionally richer. The shift toward white flour quietly changed the nutritional profile of bread. Removing the bran meant removing most of the fiber. Removing the germ meant losing many vitamins, minerals, and healthy oils. What remained was primarily starch. Bread made from this refined flour behaved differently in the body. It digested more quickly and delivered energy in a faster burst. The feeling of fullness did not last as long as it once did with whole grain bread. Yet the demand for white bread continued to grow because it was soft, mild in flavor, and easy to mass produce. At the same time, the process of making bread itself was beginning to accelerate. Large bakeries searched for ways to produce thousands of loaves every day. Time became an obstacle. Traditional fermentation could take many hours. Industrial bakers wanted methods that could produce bread much faster. Scientists and food engineers began experimenting with new techniques to shorten the process. High-speed mixers were introduced to develop dough quickly. Extra yeast was added to force the dough to rise faster. Dough conditioners were developed to strengthen the gluten structure so that bread could rise rapidly without collapsing. Each of these innovations made bread production more efficient. Factories also needed bread that would remain fresh on store shelves for longer periods. Traditional bread had a relatively short lifespan. Within a day or two, it would begin to harden and lose moisture. For a local bakery, this was not a problem because bread was sold quickly. For large factories distributing bread across cities and regions, longer shelf life became essential. Preservatives were added to slow the growth of mold. Certain fats and oils were mixed into the dough to keep the texture soft. Sugars were sometimes added to improve flavor and encourage faster fermentation. Bleaching agents were used to make flour appear whiter and more visually appealing. The result was a new type of bread that looked very different from traditional loaves. It was softer, lighter, and more uniform in shape. It could sit in plastic packaging for days without becoming hard. Supermarkets could stock shelves with identical loaves produced by large industrial bakeries. Convenience became the defining feature of modern bread. Yet behind that convenience, the ingredient list grew longer. What once required only grain, water, salt, and time now involved a variety of chemical helpers designed to control every stage of production. These additives serve specific functions. Bleaching agents altered the color of flour and changed the structure of proteins inside the dough. Dough conditioners strengthened the gluten network so that bread could rise quickly under intense mechanical mixing. Preservatives protected loaves from mold during transportation and storage. Added sugars fed yeast during rapid fermentation and improved the taste of highly refined flour. Industrial seed oils helped maintain softness and extend shelf life. Each ingredient had a technical purpose inside the factory environment. As these methods spread, the entire baking industry began to transform. Large factories replaced many small neighborhood bakeries. Production lines mixed dough, shaped loaves, and baked bread at remarkable speed. Trucks carried packaged bread across cities and into supermarkets where customers could buy a loaf that looked exactly like the one they purchased the week before. The system was efficient and profitable, but the character of bread had changed dramatically. Many people did not notice the gradual shift. Bread still looked familiar on the outside. It was sliced neatly and packaged conveniently. The taste was mild and easy to enjoy, yet the deeper structure of the food had been altered. The removal of the bran and germ meant that modern bread lacked many of the nutrients that once made it so valuable. The addition of sugars, oils, and processing agents changed how the bread behaved during digestion. The shortened fermentation process reduced the natural transformations that once occurred during slow rising. What remained was a product designed primarily for speed, softness, and shelf stability. This transformation did not happen overnight. It unfolded across decades as technology advanced and consumer preferences evolved. The demand for cheap, convenient food pushed manufacturers to refine their processes further. New formulas and additives appeared as food scientists searched for ways to improve texture, appearance, and storage life. Each innovation seemed small when viewed individually, but together they reshaped one of humanity's oldest foods into something almost unrecognizable compared with its ancient form. Even the way people perceived bread began to shift. In earlier centuries, bread carried a sense of craftsmanship and tradition. Bakers were respected members of the community who understood the rhythm of fermentation and the quality of grain. In the industrial era, bread became a standardized commodity. Machines replaced much of the manual skill once required to produce a loaf. Consistency and efficiency replaced slow craftsmanship. The transformation of bread also reflected broader changes in agriculture and global trade. Wheat varieties were developed to produce higher yields and stronger gluten structures suited for industrial baking. Large monoculture farms replaced many smaller farms. Grain traveled long distances before reaching mills and bakeries. The journey from field to table became part of a vast global supply chain. As the 20th century progressed, supermarkets expanded and packaged foods became more common in daily life. Bread joined a growing list of products designed for convenience. Families could buy loaves that stayed soft for days without requiring fresh baking. The idea of slicing bread at home from a dense rustic loaf gradually faded in many places. Instead, pre-sliced bread in plastic bags became the new normal. Despite these changes, the memory of traditional bread never completely disappeared. In certain regions, small bakeries continued to practice slow fermentation and whole grain milling. Artisan bakers preserved techniques passed down for generations. Their loaves remained darker, denser, and more flavorful than the soft white bread produced by factories. Yet these traditional methods represented only a small portion of the global bread supply. The majority of bread consumed in modern cities now comes from industrial systems optimized for scale. The ingredient lists on many packaged loaves reveal the complexity of these processes. What once required only a handful of simple ingredients now includes stabilizers, emulsifiers, and preservatives designed to control texture and longevity. Each of these additions reflects a step away from the ancient simplicity that defined bread for most of human history. Over time, the transformation became so complete that many people forgot how different bread once was. The idea of bread as a dense, nutrient-rich staple faded from everyday experience. Instead, bread became known for its softness and its ability to serve as a convenient base for sandwiches or toast. The deeper story of grains, fermentation, and nutrition remained hidden beneath layers of industrial efficiency. Yet the grains themselves still contain the same three essential parts they always had. The bran still holds fiber and minerals, the germ still carries oils and vitamins, the endosperm still provides energy in the form of carbohydrates. When those parts remain together, they form a balanced food that once nourished entire civilizations. The difference lies in how the grain is processed and how the dough is treated during baking. As bread moved from village ovens to massive production lines, every step of the process was re-engineered. Milling separated the grain, mixing accelerated fermentation, additives replaced time, packaging extended shelf life. These changes created the modern loaf that fills supermarket shelves around the world. The story of how and why these transformations happened continues to unfold as the journey of bread moves further into the modern food system. During the early 1960s, a quiet technological shift took place inside the baking industry that would permanently reshape the way bread was made. In 1961, a group of food scientists and engineers in the United Kingdom developed a method that could produce bread at remarkable speed. This system became known as the Corleywood bread process. At first glance, it appeared to be a major breakthrough for large bakeries struggling to meet growing demand. Cities were expanding quickly, supermarkets were becoming common, and the population needed massive quantities of bread every day. Traditional methods were too slow to keep up. Dough that once rested and fermented for hours could now be pushed through machines and turned into finished loaves in a fraction of the time. The key to this new method was intense mechanical power. Giant mixers spun at extremely high speeds, forcing the dough to develop structure almost instantly. Instead of allowing fermentation to strengthen the dough slowly, the machines did the work through sheer force. Bakers also increased the amount of yeast in the mixture so that the dough would rise faster. Additional substances known as dough conditioners were added to strengthen the gluten network and stabilize the dough during this rapid process. The result was a system that could transform flour, water, yeast, and additives into bread with incredible efficiency. What once required patience and time could now happen on an industrial schedule measured in minutes. Factories quickly adopted this method because it offered clear economic advantages. Production lines could operate continuously. Thousands of loaves could be produced each hour. Supermarkets could receive a steady supply of identical bread with predictable texture and shape. For the food industry, the new process solved several logistical problems at once. Flour that was considered lower quality by traditional standards could still be used effectively because the powerful mixing compensated for weaknesses in the grain. Bread could be manufactured rapidly and delivered across wide distribution networks. The system reduced labor costs and increased output. Within a few decades, the Corleywood bread process became one of the most widely used industrial bread-making methods in the world. Many of the soft packaged loaves found in modern supermarkets are still produced using variations of this approach. While the new method solved problems of speed and scale, it also changed the nature of bread itself. Slow fermentation once played an important role in shaping the structure and digestibility of traditional bread. During long resting periods, natural enzymes inside the grain began breaking down complex compounds. This process helped transform proteins and carbohydrates into forms that the human body could process more easily. When fermentation was shortened dramatically, many of these natural transformations no longer had time to occur. Instead of relying on time and biological processes, the modern system relied on mechanical energy and chemical assistance. The dough was forced into structure rather than slowly developing it. To support this rapid method, manufacturers introduced a range of additives designed to control the behavior of the dough. Dough conditioners helped strengthen the gluten structure so the bread could rise quickly without collapsing. Emulsifiers improved texture and allowed the dough to remain soft even after baking. Preservatives slowed the growth of mold so the bread could survive transportation and extended storage. These substances allowed bread to move through factories and supply chains at a pace never before possible. Alongside these technological changes, another layer of complexity entered the story of modern bread. Many people are unaware that certain chemical agents have been used in flour and dough to alter the properties of bread during production. One example that often raises concern is potassium bromate. This compound has been used in some baking processes to strengthen dough and help bread rise higher in the oven. However, scientific studies over time raised questions about its safety. Some research suggested that potassium bromate could be linked to cancer in laboratory animals. As a result, several countries chose to ban or restrict its use in food production. Despite these concerns, the compound has historically been permitted in certain regions under controlled conditions. The debate surrounding potassium bromate highlights how the chemistry of modern bread can become surprisingly complex compared with the simplicity of traditional loaves. The journey of wheat before it even reaches the bakery adds another dimension to the story. Modern agriculture often involves large-scale farming methods designed to maximize crop yields and efficiency. In some farming systems, herbicides are applied to wheat fields before harvest to dry the plants and make harvesting easier. One of the chemicals commonly discussed in this context is glyphosate. It is widely used in agriculture to control weeds, but its presence in food systems has sparked intense debate among scientists and health experts. Some researchers have raised questions about possible long-term effects of repeated exposure, while regulatory agencies in different countries continue to evaluate the available evidence. For consumers standing in the bread aisle of a supermarket, these agricultural practices remain largely invisible. The wheat inside the loaf has already passed through farms, processing plants, and factories before arriving on the shelf. Inside modern baking facilities, additional processing chemicals may be used to adjust the texture and behavior of dough. Enzymes are sometimes added to help control how starches break down during baking. Oxidizing agents may strengthen the gluten structure to improve volume and softness. Emulsifiers can help distribute fats evenly throughout the dough, creating a uniform crumb texture. Each of these ingredients performs a specific technical function within the industrial process, yet the combined effect is a product that differs greatly from the simple mixture of flour, water, salt, and thyme that once defined bread. These developments raise an important question that many people rarely stop to consider. When a loaf contains refined flour, added sugars, stabilizers, preservatives, emulsifiers, conditioners, and traces of agricultural chemicals from the grain supply chain, the final product begins to look very different from the bread that sustained earlier generations. The appearance may still resemble bread, but the journey from field to table has become far more complicated than most consumers realize. The body's response to modern bread can also differ from the response to traditional whole grain bread. One of the major reasons lies in the structure of refined flour. When wheat is milled to remove the bran and germ, the remaining endosperm becomes mostly starch. Without the fiber that once surrounded these starch molecules, digestion can occur much faster. After eating refined bread, the body breaks down the carbohydrates quickly and releases glucose into the bloodstream. This rapid rise in blood sugar can trigger a surge of insulin as the body attempts to move the glucose into cells. For some people, this cycle may lead to a quick burst of energy followed by a noticeable drop later. That drop in energy can create a sense of fatigue or renewed hunger soon after eating. Fiber once played a powerful role in moderating this process. In traditional whole grain bread, the bran layer slowed digestion and helped regulate how quickly sugars entered the bloodstream. The presence of fiber also contributed to a lasting feeling of fullness. People who ate dense whole grain loaves often remained satisfied for longer periods after a meal. With refined bread lacking most of that fiber, the body processes the food differently. Hunger may return sooner, encouraging additional snacking or larger meals. These patterns can influence eating habits over time. Rapid swings in blood sugar may encourage cravings for sweet or carbohydrate-rich foods. Frequent hunger may lead to higher overall calorie intake during the day. Some researchers studying nutrition and metabolism have suggested that highly refined carbohydrates may play a role in weight gain and metabolic imbalances when consumed in large amounts. Bread itself is not the only factor in these patterns, but the transformation from whole grain bread to refined industrial bread changes how this staple food interacts with the body. Looking back across centuries reveals how dramatically the character of bread has changed. The bread that nourished earlier generations rarely resembled the soft white slices common today. Traditional loaves were darker in color because the entire grain remained in the flour. They were denser and heavier because they contained fiber and nutrients that gave the bread substance. The crusts were often thick and the interior slightly chewy. Fermentation occurred slowly, sometimes through natural sourdough cultures that had been maintained by bakers for years. These cultures contained communities of beneficial microorganisms that shaped the flavor and structure of the bread. Slow fermentation had additional effects inside the dough. During the long resting period, natural enzymes and friendly bacteria began breaking down certain compounds found in grains. One of these compounds is phytic acid, which can bind to minerals and make them harder for the body to absorb. Fermentation helps reduce the level of this compound, allowing minerals such as iron and magnesium to become more available during digestion. The process also begins breaking down complex carbohydrates and proteins, which may make the bread easier for some people to tolerate. Because the dough rested for many hours, the structure of traditional bread developed gradually. Air pockets formed slowly as fermentation released carbon dioxide. The gluten network strengthened naturally through time rather than mechanical force. When the loaf entered the oven, it expanded gently and formed a crust that protected the interior during baking. The final result was a loaf with deep flavor, complex aroma, and satisfying texture. Modern industrial bread often follows a different path. Instead of waiting for natural fermentation to transform the dough, the process moves quickly from mixing to shaping to baking. High-speed mixers replace hours of resting time. Extra yeast forces the dough to rise rapidly. Additives maintain softness and uniformity. The finished bread is light and airy, designed to appeal to consumers who prefer soft textures and mild flavors. Yet the deeper biological processes that once defined bread making are largely absent. The difference between these two approaches becomes even more noticeable when comparing the way the bread feels and tastes. Traditional loaves require slow chewing because they are dense and structured. Their flavor develops from fermentation, creating subtle sour notes and rich grain aromas. Industrial bread is designed to be soft and easy to bite. The flavor is often neutral, sometimes slightly sweet, reflecting the addition of sugars and the absence of long fermentation. These contrasts lead directly to one of the most important questions surrounding bread today. When people discuss whether bread is healthy or unhealthy, the conversation often treats bread as a single category. Yet the term bread now covers an enormous range of products that differ dramatically in their ingredients, processing methods, and nutritional value. A dense loaf made from whole grains and fermented slowly bears little resemblance to a factory-produced loaf made from refined flour and numerous additives. This raises a deeper issue about how modern food systems operate. Many staple foods that once existed in simple forms have been redesigned through industrial processes. Efficiency, shelf life, and visual appeal often guide these changes. The transformation of bread provides one of the clearest examples of how a natural food can gradually evolve into a highly processed product without most people noticing the transition. Standing in the bread aisle of a supermarket today presents a surprising variety of choices. Loaves labeled as white bread, wheat bread, multigrain bread, or sandwich bread fill the shelves. Some contain dozens of ingredients. Others attempt to return to more traditional formulas. Yet the differences between them are not always obvious at first glance. The packaging may look similar, and the slices may appear equally soft and uniform. This complexity leads back to the central question that shapes the entire discussion about bread. The question is not simply whether bread itself is good or bad. Bread has sustained human societies for thousands of years. Instead, the more meaningful question focuses on the type of bread that people are eating today, the methods used to produce it, the ingredients included in it, and the structure of the grain inside it all influence how the bread behaves inside the human body. Modern bread stands as one of the most transformed foods in the supermarket environment. From ancient stone mills to high-speed industrial mixers, from slow fermentation to rapid mechanical production, from simple ingredients to long ingredient lists, the journey of bread reflects the broader transformation of the modern food system. Bread itself was never the problem. For thousands of years, it helped feed civilizations, power long days of work, and sustain entire communities. The real change did not happen in the grain. It happened in the way humans decided to process it. When bread moved from slow traditional kitchens into massive industrial systems, speed and convenience slowly replaced patience and simplicity. The grain was stripped down, the fermentation was shortened, and a long list of additives began to appear. Little by little, one of the most natural foods on earth was transformed into something very different. And when a natural food becomes ultra-processed, it stops behaving like the food our bodies evolved to handle. digestion changes, energy levels change, hunger patterns change. The body responds in ways that many people never connect back to the foods they eat every day. Understanding this difference changes the entire conversation about bread. The question is no longer whether bread is good or bad. The real question is what kind of bread is sitting on the plate. The ancient loaf made from whole grains and slow fermentation carries a completely different story than the ultra-processed version produced inside modern factories. One represents thousands of years of tradition and natural nutrition. The other represents a fast industrial shortcut designed for convenience. Once this hidden history becomes clear, the loaf in the supermarket aisle suddenly looks different. A simple slice of bread now carries a long journey behind it, from ancient fields to modern food laboratories, from stone mills to high-speed machines, from simple ingredients to complex formulas. And that journey explains why the same food that once sustained entire civilizations can affect people so differently today. If this video opened your eyes to the real story behind modern bread, make sure to like the video so more people can discover this information. Subscribe to the channel for more simple health truths that reveal what is really happening inside the foods we eat every day. And share this video with someone who eats bread regularly, because the next time they pick up a loaf, they might see it in a completely new way.